Hare Srinivasa. Namaskara Elargu. Before we get started with the program, let us start with a short chant. We'll say Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya 5 times. We'll also pray for the well-being of mankind, especially for the people in Los Angeles who are deeply affected by the wildfires. So let us pray for their well-being. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 सर्वे च सुखिनः सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. Once again, wish you all a very happy 2025. ವೈಕುಂಠ ಏಕಾದಶಿ ಮತ್ತು ಮುಕ್ಕೋಟಿ ದ್ವಾದಶಿಯ ಶುಭಾಶಯಗಳು. Just like last calendar year, the three organizations, ತ್ರಿವೇಣಿ ಸಂಗಮ ಅಂತ ಇವರು ಪವಮಾನಚಾರ್ ಅವರು ಹೇಳಿದರು. The three organizations, mainly New England Sri Raghavendra Swami Brindavana, Boston, also known as NESRSB, Gayatri Kannada Vipravrinda, GKVV, and Dasa Sahitya Parichaya, DSP, have come together to organize programs on Dasa Sahitya and Vyasa Sahitya. We have very good plans to basically conduct several programs in 2025, and we will keep you posted on those plans. We encourage you to join this community. I've provided the link in some of the earlier announcements so that you can get updates very regularly. And as you all know, Gita Jayanti was celebrated in December, and several organizations in New England basically celebrate it during the months of December through February. So in that context, from DSP, NESRSB, and GKVV, we will begin the calendar year 2025 with a talk on BhagavadGita for Professional Excellence by Sundar Madakshiravaru. I'll give a brief intro about Sundar. I've known him for the last 20 years, basically. We were colleagues when we were working together in symphony services. But Sundar Madakshira is a recognized business leader in India. He has held leadership positions at SAP, Adobe, Visa, Unilever, Infosys, Wipro, and now Cinch. Another distinguishing factor is that he's a member of the 4-member Prime Minister's National Digital Innovation Council and member of the editorial committee of the Harvard Business School, so close to New England. Along with his professional work, right, he has been studying the Indian scriptures under noted gurus like Sri Vyasanakere Prabhanjanacharya, Sri Srikantacharya Bayari, and Sri Srinidhi Acharya Pyati for over 35 years. He has written 3 books on Sri Madhva philosophy, and recently he wrote a book on Sri Vadirajuru also. He lives in Bangalore, India, with his wife and son. And also, Sundar is no stranger to New England audiences. So he delivered several enlightening talks on Madhva philosophy, Yatigalu, and Haridasaru in 2021 during the COVID era. And it was under the auspices of NESRSP Gnanakalpa Vriksha. Like I said, I've known Sundar for almost 20 years. And one thing that was striking about Sundar was the intensity and thoroughness with which he approaches any venture. I'd like to kind of list out an anecdote out here. Once we were actually traveling in the car together, and I mentioned to him that I was traveling to Mantralaya over that weekend. And surprisingly, he said that he had never been to Mantralaya, because I was totally surprised, because he said he was so deep into spiritual pursuits and deeply knowledgeable on Madhva philosophy and religion, right? So obviously I asked him, why have you not been to Mantralaya? That's rather strange. But what he said was even more surprising, right? Because it was very characteristic of his personality. He basically said that he likes to read about the place he visits thoroughly and also study the works of the yatis and saints and sages basically associated with those pilgrimage centers before visiting those places. So nothing is casual for Sundar, right? And that will actually show when he actually starts talking. I believe now that he has visited Mantralaya after studying Rayuru's works in detail. With that, welcome Sundar once again, and we are eagerly looking forward to learning more on how we could apply Bhagavad Gita teachings in our daily life. It is a great privilege and an honor to have you talking to us today. Over to you, Sundar.
ಎಲ್ಲರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಆಚಾರ್ಯ ಪವನೋಸ್ಮಾಕಂ ಆಚಾರ್ಯಾಣಿ ಚ ಭಾರತಿ ದೇವೋ ನಾರಾಯಣ ಶ್ರೀಶಃ ದೇವಿ ಮಂಗಲ ದೇವತಾ. So, good evening, good morning, good day to all of you, depending on which part of the world you're joining from. It's been a pleasure knowing all of you in during the pandemic when we met and we had opportunities to interact on several topics of spiritual nature. And it's been a pleasure knowing Sujit as well for so many years. Um, First as a colleague and then as a dear friend. We've had many interesting interactions on various contexts. So very glad to be here with all of you today. Today, as Sujit was saying, it's a culmination of so many things. It is the start of the year. It is the Vaikuntha Ekadashi yesterday. It is Mukkoti Dwadashi today. It is also the Aradhana Mahotsava of one of the pioneers of Madhva philosophy, Sri Raghottama Tirtha, who comes in the Uttaradimat lineage. And I think he also mentioned Sri Raghavendra Swamiji. Now, why are these people relevant? Is that I had a very interesting journey the last 2.5 years with Bhagavad Gita. And both Sri Raghottama Tirtha Swamiji and Sri Raghavendra Swamiji have written commentaries on Madhvacharya's Gita Bhashya and Gita Tatparya. So this whole genesis of today's topic, which is lessons from Bhagavad Gita for professional excellence, came from those sessions. So what happened was Bhagavad Gita, I learned Bhagavad Gita from Dr. Srinidhi Acharya Pyati. He was a researcher at the Purna Pragna Samshodhana Mandira, and now he is the principal of Vyasatirtha Vidyapitha in Mysore. Now, during this whole very interesting session that we had, which lasted practically 2 years, we had the opportunity to study the works of some of the greatest thinkers on the topic of Bhagavad Gita, a total of 12 commentaries for Gita Bhashya and Gita Tatparya. Now, that is when I got curious, saying that Bhagavad Gita is supposed to be the shortest philosophical work in the world, just 701 shlokas, and which is probably set in a very short time in the context of the Mahabharata war. In such a simple book, because as all of you know, even people who have a very rudimentary understanding of Sanskrit can understand Bhagavad Gita to some extent. So why was it needed for so many commentators to write about this topic? And when I was studying these lessons, apart from the adhyatmic and the spiritual learnings, I also saw that many of these learnings were something that could actually have a very positive impact and on our profession, achieving professional excellence. Not only this, the more I read, different articles that were being written in the popular press about career, about professional excellence, about doing anything well, a lot of these lessons from the Bhagavad Gita actually seem to impact them. So, and they were actually in consonance. So if you read the different seminal articles written in popular management dailies, you'll realize that over the last 10 to 15 years, you will see the trend about how these learnings are actually tending towards the learnings from Bhagavad Gita. A lot of understanding of HR systems, understanding on leadership are all coming from what Bhagavad Gita actually talks about. So I got very curious. I started making notes in two ways when I was studying the Bhagavad Gita. One is the adhyatmic and the spiritual meaning, which is what Bhagavad Gita is meant to be. And then I started going into, okay, now this is the adhyatmic meaning. And the other notebook started getting me lessons on our personal excellence. And that is what I'm here to share with all of you today. So with that background, let us get into the discussion on what are those lessons from Bhagavad Gita that we can adopt? Whether we are a professional, students, somebody who's a homemaker, it could be anybody. There are a lot of lessons that Bhagavad Gita gives us, which can help us in our daily lives as well. So before getting into Bhagavad Gita, we'll have to take one step back in the story of Mahabharata. There are some very interesting lessons there as well. So Bhagavad Gita was set at the start of the war. We all know this. But it is very surprising to many as to why Arjuna chose to wait for so long and then ask Lord Krishna these questions that he asks, and Lord Krishna responds to it. And that becomes the text of Bhagavad Gita itself. But if you just go back, Arjuna is filled with anxiety. He doesn't want to kill his swajana, or his own people, as he calls it. He has to kill his own relatives. He has to kill his guru, and he has to kill several other people who are very, very near and dear to him. But this war did not happen on one fine day. It was something which was a build-up over several years. So Arjuna, in fact, was a person who was preparing during the Vanavasa. That means a period that is there when the Pandavas were exiled. Arjuna actually goes to different places. Finally, he goes to the Devaloka itself to acquire these weapons. So he knew very well that this war is going to be fought, and it is also going to be a Nirnayaka Yuddha, as they call it, which is a terminal war. There will be no winners and losers. Everybody will get vanquished, and a few people will live to see to see the daylight the next day. That was very clear to him. In fact, he has one weapon or one ayudha or one shastra which he is going to be using against a particular warrior. So he had something to kill Bhishmacharya, he had something to kill Dronacharya, he had something to kill Karna, Jayadratha, and several other people whom he kills during the process. So he was very well aware. In fact, he was extremely well prepared to use it against them. And after doing all of this, what happens is he gets nervous at the beginning of the war. Now, what would have been the typical reaction if some student, let us say he's just getting into an examination, and he comes and asks the teacher outside the examination hall that, sir, I have some questions for you. What would have been the teacher's response? The first response he would have given means, what were you doing all these days? Why did you not ask me? Is this the time to ask this question? And we give that kind of an answer sometime to our children, or maybe anybody else, saying, what were you doing so long? And maybe we would have given them a quick answer and said, look, this is the answer. For a more detailed time, let us connect later and we'll follow it up. In corporate world, it's very common to say that, okay, we will collect offline on this topic. Okay. But Krishna didn't do that. Krishna doesn't do that. What Krishna does is he proceeds to give a very, very elaborate answer which touches upon every aspect. And I'm saying the word every with a lot of responsibility. Every aspect of philosophical world is touched upon in Krishna's short but super impactful spiritual message. So that is the depth to which he goes into that. So our question may be, why did he do that? When Arjuna asked him a pointed question, saying that I'm not able to fight the war, why didn't he give him an answer which could have been shorter, which could have been just to the point, say, look, just fight the war today. In the evening, we will connect and I will tell you why you should be fighting this war. But for now, just fight the war. He didn't say that. He doesn't say that for a unique reason. He says, look, when you're fighting this war, I want you to fight this war as a prayer to me. This is again Sri Raghavendra Swamiji's insight that he gives. He says that it is very important that Arjuna knows why he is fighting the war. It is not a war which is personal in nature. He's not seeking revenge. It is not a personal war that is fighting for somebody's honor or for somebody's throne. It is a war against adharma. And as a Kshatriya, he has no choice but to fight this war. I think this is the first career tip that we get, which is that you look at your career as a with a lot of with a sense of purpose. Your career has to be driven by a certain set of purpose. Yes, we all have a livelihood that we seek. We, we may enjoy the whole topic of being in technology companies, a doctor, or anyone for that matter. A student definitely wants to score well in an examination, get into a job, and so on and so forth. A homemaker will have their own goal that he or she is trying to achieve. But what is important is how do you ensure that you have a larger purpose in your life, a larger purpose for your career? Now, why should that be the case? It is going back to a study that Harvard Business Review has been doing for many years. And here are certain things about the modern workplace that they have observed. They are saying it is an increasing number of people wanting to do something else. That's the first finding of that research. I will just go through all of them, very quickly, because I think many of us are familiar with these things. Increasing number of people in a company are wanting to do something else, not their job, right? The second one is it's got a very low level of engagement at work. When people are working, they do not seem connected to the organization and the teams. The third one is significant of amount of work challenges are coming out even more profusely than they were in the past. Overwork, lack of fairness, and politics at work are really bringing down the energy levels of companies. The fourth one is companies do not seem to meet people's aspirations, whatever they may be. It may be professional, aspiration. It could be materialistic, aspiration. It could be anything. Most companies do not seem to meet people's aspiration, and there is a constant sense of anxiety over workplace. That's why you have the concept of Monday morning blues and all this is nothing but a manifestation of the anxiety over the workplace. And lastly, people are complaining about 10 to 12 hours of work every day, followed by a lot of time that they spend in negotiating the city traffic. So these are some of the things that are coming out more and more deeply when we look at the workplace situations. So, in other words, workplace has become a source of livelihood. It has become a source of energy. Yes, truly, we all enjoy our work, but at the same time, there are some very serious issues that people are seeing at work. So much so that it is virtually crippling many people. Because all this what that I mentioned now is at a huge percentage. 91% of the global workforce is complaining this about work. So if you look at a lot of these things, they are very similar to the questions that Arjuna is asking Lord Krishna as a part of his whole the Bhagavad Gita narration. So these questions keep coming up in several ways, and the master guru that we say Krishnam Mande Jagat Guru for this reason, that he has answered this in and what forms as Bhagavad Gita is encyclopedic in nature, right? So in Bhagavad Gita has the status of an Upanishad for this reason. So with that, let us move into the next, and as we go into that Bhagavad Gita, we will go, not shloka by shloka, but look at what are the lessons that we can pick up, which are, very directly connected to our professional excellence. So there is the Bhagavad Gita starts with, Dhritarashtra Uvacha, and he's asking a question, Dharma Kshetre Kurukshetre. Samaveta Yuyutsavaha. So when I was looking at this shloka, I found the second lesson in our philosophical pursuit and on a professional excellence right there. Everybody, we all know, the whole Mahabharata war lasted 18 days. But in my opinion, this was the shortest war ever fought. So all of us might be thinking 18, now you said 18 days, but this is, how can it be the shortest war? In the first two words itself, I think the result of a war was declared. It is Dharmakshetre Kurukshetre. The Dharmakshetra, which is Kurukshetra, or Kurukshetra, which happens to be a Dharmakshetra. That is where, the Pandavas and Kauravas have assembled. Mamakaha, Pandavas Chaiva. My sons and Pandu's sons have come. Again, Dhritarashtra's failings are so clearly visible. He's, after all, Pandava's, uncle. He is the one who was responsible for their upbringing after Pandu passes away, unfortunately. So neither is there Pandu, nor is there mother, Madri. Even she is not there. But yet, Dhritarashtra never managed to come above these partisan lines that actually existed between him and the throne. So if you look at Dharmakshetre, Kurukshetre, so Kurukshetra is a Dharmakshetra. Who is going to win in a Dharmakshetra? Dharma is going to win. So I think those of you familiar with cricket, I don't know how many of you watch cricket closely. There is something called a turning track. That means the ball will be spinning a lot. It is naturally lending itself to a spinning to a spinner. So a spinner is more likely to succeed on the track. Similarly, there is a fast bowlers or a pace bowlers track where the ball is swinging a lot. So who is going to win on the track? A spinner is going to win on the track, or a fast bowler is going to win on that kind of a track. So who is going to win the Mahabharata war is evident in the first two words itself. It is Dharma who is going to win. And who is Dharma? Lord Krishna is Dharma. Dharmakrit, Dharmakrit, Dharmi, as Vishnu Sahasrama tells us, is the person who is going to win the war. Dharma is going to win the war. Who is Dharma? Dharma Raja or Yudhishthira is going to win the war. Dharma is going to win the war, which is who? The Pandavas are on the side of the Dharma. So whenever Krishna has asked, somebody asks Krishna, why are you on Pandava's side? He says, because I am on the side of Dharma. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita itself, Sanjaya, who is narrating this whole episode to Dhritarashtra, tells him that Yatra Yogeshwara Krishno, Yatra Partho Dhanurdaraha, Tatra Shir Vijayo Bhutir, Dhruva Netir Matar Mama. He's declared the results of the war very clearly. Yatra Yogeshwara Krishna, where Yogeshwara Krishna is there, Yatra Partho Dhanurdaraha, where there is the super archer, Arjuna, that is where he's going to win the war. That part is going to win the war. It is Sanjaya who's declaring it. Sanjaya can be treated as a novice compared to all the great people who are actually fighting the war. He is able to see something that Dhritarashtra is not able to see, that Duryodhana is not able to see, and many of his accomplices are not able to see the end of the war. So here are the second lesson, which is that when you are picking up a career or when you are picking up something, we need to choose your battle carefully. If you are fighting a war in Dharma Kshetra, which is Kurukshetra in this case, you have to be on the side of Dharma. If you are not on the side of the Dharma, you are not going to win this. I think many of us make this mistake of picking up careers over which we have absolutely no liking, or it does not lend itself to the way we are. We probably made that, that career choice out of compulsion. So one may ask, see, we have already spent so much time in our career. How do we now rectify this? Because yeah, I know that maybe I shouldn't have been a doctor. Maybe I shouldn't have been a computer science, professional, or it could be anything, right? So now what do I do? The thing is, now I think one should slowly and steadily start aligning your own thought process with what is happening in your career. You cannot, for example, a doctor cannot say that I don't like, you know, I don't like all this blood and pus and everything. So I will take a back seat. I don't like diseases. I don't like people suffering. Then he should not be a doctor. And this is not an example that I'm giving out of any kind of exaggeration. This is a real life example of a person I met, a person who stopped the medical exam after finishing his MBBS, wanting to pick up a career for his post graduation. He is one of the leading students in India. He told me this, that actually, I don't like to do this. I like to be doing something else. And I don't like sickness. I don't like patients. I don't like the hospital. So it's quite surprising to me why he picked up this field in the first place. Because as a doctor, I don't know what he was expecting to see. This is what a doctor will see. So similarly, I think it's very important that we align ourselves to the requirements of a career rather than trying to run away from it all your life. Then I think a person will find a sense of purpose, a sense of alignment, and sense of meaning that will come out of it. Many people are in careers which they are not able to align themselves to. Yes, you may still have the Monday morning blue, right? Today, when we are on Friday evening in the US time, Monday looks very far away. But in very short time, Monday will hit us. And we don't have to go through this pressure of going in and working in a place with which we are not aligned. And the amount of pressure that it puts on all of us is enormous. And where will be the question of excellence when you're doing trying to do something which you are not wanting to do? The question of excellence doesn't arise there because we are not aligned to that topic itself. So looking at this, I think it's important that the first shloka itself gives us a very profound lesson in towards how we can actually achieve professional excellence. Then a few shlokas pass by, and then there is a conversation that Duryodhana is having with Dhritarashtra, with Dronacharya. So on the war battlefield, he looks at everybody. He looks at the Kauravas, he looks at the Pandavas. Now, surprisingly, even Arjuna did the same thing. He asked Krishna to bring the chariot in the middle of the battlefield so that he is able to see both sides. And Krishna, being the master skillsman, does precisely that. He brings the chariot to a spot where Arjuna can actually see all his people. And that leads to the provocations that Arjuna has. So we will come to that later. But right now, what Duryodhana does is that he looks at both the sides. And you know what is his conclusion? He says, Aparyaptam, our side looks inadequate, whereas the Pandavas seem to be stronger than us. He says, the side which has been protected by Balam Bhima Bhirakshitam. Balam Bhima Bhirakshitam. The side which is protected by Bhima seems stronger. And the side which is protected by Bhishma or Bhishmacharya seems less protected, seems weak. Actually, it should have been the other way around. Because Kauravas are 11 Akshohinis. One Akshohini is a unit of a battalion. So it is mentioned very clearly. I will not get into the detail right now. But what constitutes an Akshohini Saina? It's like a battalion which has got so many Rathis, Maharathis, and different types of warriors, so many elephants, so many horses, etc. That's called one battalion or one Akshohini. So Kauravas have 11 Akshohinis, whereas the Pandavas have only 7 Akshohinis. So they are actually much stronger. Kauravas are 57% stronger than Pandavas when it comes to the war. So he should have actually said the other way around. But this moral corruption that he has in his mind all the time, if you see the whole Mahabharata story, it never gives him the strength to fight properly because he never does anything with dharma. Every time he's wanting to take shortcuts, every time he wants to do something, and somehow manage to vanquish the Pandavas, which we know he has never ever succeeded in his life. So this aparyaptam or this feeling of weakness comes from what? This inadequacy, where is it coming from? It is coming from a certain place of moral rectitude. It is coming because he is morally not right. And that is, seems to be eating. That's not the end of the shloka's takeaways as well. Arjuna got certain doubts in his mind. Whom did he go to? He went to Lord Krishna himself. Whereas Duryodhana goes to his guru, Dronacharya. Now, nothing wrong in going to a guru. But the ultimate guru is Lord Krishna himself. So it is a spiritual message for all of us that whenever we have challenges, let us go to him. Let us not pray to anybody else. Or when somebody goes to the guru, he should wait there patiently for an answer. Do you see this? If you read the Bhagavad Gita, he has asked a set of questions, but he does not wait for the answers. So this is also a question. This is also a very big learning for all of us. Saying that whenever you are in a situation that is like this, what should one be doing? Which is that winning the battle in your mind is very important before you win it on the battlefield. So many of us are in the world of business. So before we win the war in the marketplace, we have to win the war in our minds. That is a third lesson in our career. So whenever you are going to first win it in your mind, this whole technique of visualization that we all have been taught, which is that, how do we sort of ensure that, we are reaching out to the people, we are understanding our work, we understand what is giving us and be prepared for it. If you see whole Mahabharata story, Duryodhana is never preparing himself. He is never saying, okay, let me fight this war, let me prepare for it. The Pandavas, on the contrary, are always prepared. It may be against the Kauravas in this case, but they have fought several other wars. They are always preparing themselves. And the first preparation they do is to seek the blessings of Lord Krishna in the entire story, if you see. And they are always praying to the devatas and the gods to upskill themselves. Right? Again, a very, very important lesson that comes to us from Arjuna. He is a chronicle learner. He's always acquiring arms. He's always acquiring new skills. He asks a set of questions, and then goes and tries to get the answers from Lord Krishna. He waits patiently. He waits patiently, and then finally he asks this question. He says it in so many words, and Krishna is then, draining him of all his questions, of all his anxieties, and all his dilemmas by saying, Arjuna, I have told you so many things. Are there any questions left in your mind? Why is he doing that? Because we are not going to enter a war and win it if we have dilemmas in our mind, which is what I think happens to many of us, which is that every time we are still in half measures. We want to do this, but then we are not sure whether that's the right thing for us to do. We're still thinking in our mind as we are acting. All of you drive, I'm sure. Imagine you're driving on a highway in the US without clarity about where you're going, right? So you have to be clear in your mind as much as possible. Now, 100% clarity may never come, but one should strive towards that clarity, because the more clear people are about their work, I think the higher is the chance of a success. Workplace anxiety, the number one reason, according to several surveys that people have, is lack of clarity at work. People don't know what they are doing. They don't understand why they are doing it. If you are able to establish it for yourself and also for your teams, you will have achieved a lot in the process, right? So the way Arjuna waits for the answer patiently with faith. Duryodhana does not have faith. He does not have a faith in anybody. He does not have faith in Bhishmacharya, who was all of 800 years. He had studied the weaponry in the Svargaloka itself. He had studied for a period of 525 years. We call it postdoctoral studies. What will we call Bhishmacharya studies? Post. I mean, you can add many of them after that. So how many PhDs Bhishmacharya would have got had he lived today? So practically spent 70% of his time in formal education. This is not some casual education, it's formal education. And that too where? In the Devaloka, right? In that place, he has studied so much. Duryodhana does not have faith in him. Duryodhana does not have faith in Dronacharya, who is his own guru. He is the one who taught him everything about weaponry. Look at the difference between Arjuna and Duryodhana. Duryodhana is also facing his Svajanas only. He is facing his cousins. He is facing his uncles. He is facing many people who are Pandava's children. But he does not get any of these questions, spiritual questions, about am I doing the right thing? If there is one, and look at Krishna, he earlier told Duryodhana, don't fight this war. You should not be fighting this war. It is an adharma yuddha. And what is he telling Arjuna today? This is a dharma yuddha, right? It's the same war, but depending on which side you are, that war is a dharma yuddha or an adharma yuddha. So these are many subtleties that one can observe when one studies the Bhagavad Gita. And that is why it has got the status of an Upanishad, because Bhagavad Gita, so Upanishatsu, that's how the text runs, because of the profound nature and several learnings that we can get from this place. So that is the next learning that we have from this war and from this Bhagavad Gita. So the next one is that as I said, he comes in between the two armies. Senayor Ubhayor Madhye Ratham Sthapaya Mechyuta. That means Achyuta, he's calling him as Achyuta. Please get me in the middle so that I can see both sides of both warring parties very clearly. Again, a big lesson for us is a lesson in objectivity. Is very objective. He wants to be very objective. He wants to look at both sides. So sometimes when we are faced with many questions, with many dilemmas, we all would have heard that CEOs and others and many other leaders just go on a retreat. They just go away. You can't contact them through any ways. Bill Gates from Microsoft is known for doing that for many years now, where he just disappears in the month of December, reading a lot of books. So he has his shortlisting of those books itself is very interesting. He talks to the authors of these books over the years to actually decide whether he should be reading that book or not. Now, we have all heard this. We have these company offsites and so on and so forth. I think there should be time that we should all make to do offsites for our own lives. I don't know how many of us have had this idea that why don't I do a strategy session for my life and just go away somewhere? Because it just gives us the help of, the whole sense of being objective. So Arjuna does precisely that. If he was standing where he was earlier, he would have been closer to the Pandavas than he was to the Kauravas, right? So that itself would have taken away some objectivity, right? So he wants to move right in between so that he can see both sides of the two warring parties very clearly. And then the set of questions start to emerge in his mind. So again, I think a sense of objectivity is very clear. Now I will break away from these lessons for just 2 minutes and focus on one shloka, because that is the question that we get about Bhagavad Gita often. We say the Bhagavad Gita is so profound, so long, 701 shlokas. How come all this happened in such a short time? Right? There was a war going on, right? If you see the Bhagavad Gita shlokas itself, they talk about all the conch shells or the Shankha actually being blown by everybody. They are in that state. This is not a state when, they are all thinking about how to fight the war and all this. The war has already started practically, because the war starts when you blow the conch. So everybody has already done that. So why did this happen? How can this happen so fast? And the other important trivia to note here is Bhishmacharya was the first person to blow the conch. You know why? Because he sees Duryodhana actually talking to uh, Dronacharya and asking this question, saying that, okay, I'm feeling anxious because look at, I feel we are inadequate. So before Duryodhana goes any further in that rat hole of anxiety and lack of confidence and depression, just to give him that confidence that we are all there for you, he blows the conch. Bhishmacharya blows the conch. Then, of course, as we know, everybody else then blows the conch, the Shankhanada. That Shankhanada is already done. And at that time, this question comes. So why, how come this happened? Right? Here, I think you see in the whole Bhagavad Gita shlokas, Arjuna uses several names to address Lord Krishna. He says Krishna, he calls him Keshava, he calls him Achyuta, and so on and so forth. The Arjuna is also addressed by Krishna by different names. He says Kaunteya, he says Kaurava, because he is also Kaurava, he is also a Pandava, because they all are descendants of Kuru. So they are all Kauravas. But they are also Pandavas, because one section within the Kauravas are Pandavas. So he addresses him by different names. Of course, Arjuna he uses very often. But Sanjaya uses a different name for both of them in this context. He calls Krishna as Hrishikesha and he calls Arjuna as Gudakesha. Now there is a different meaning that to these words and why they were used at that point in time. Hrishikesha, it means Lord Vishnu, and he is the controller of all our senses. That is the meaning of the word Hrishikesha. And Gudakesha has two meanings in Sanskrit. Some people have interpreted it as the first meaning, which is a simple meaning, which is that somebody who had curly hair. That's the first meaning. But in a philosophical text like Bhagavad Gita, which is equivalent to an Upanishad, nothing just slips like that. That also has a different meaning, which is that Gudakesha is a curly hair. What relevance does it have in this context? If one contemplates, a second meaning is actually more applicable. Arjuna is called Gudakesha because he has the ability to remain awake without sleep. He has conquered sleep. So, in other words, his senses are always at their best. He's super alert. He's very, very open to learning. So he's a sponge. He's a radar of a different caliber. And who's talking to him? Rishikesha, the controller of all those senses. So it's a perfect teacher student combination you can ever think of. So let me give you a small example. When a student is studying in first or second grade, even a multiplication like 21 into 12, let us say, he has to teach. That has to be worked out on that board and shown as to what is 21 by 22. Move that into a PhD class. What happens? Let's say somebody is doing a mathematics research and somebody has to multiply 21 into 12. Will the PhD guide stop there and teach the student what is how 21 into 12 has to be computed? That's not what he's going to be teaching, right? Because this is a PhD class. So if you look at the philosophical context, look at what is going on there. It is the Nirnayaka Yuddha. One of the most gruesome wars in history is the Mahabharata war. And the Pandavas and Kauravas are there, looking at each other. This is the moment when Arjuna should have been at his best, but instead he's on the ground. And Krishna has to preach the Bhagavad Gita to him. In that context, whatever Krishna was saying, Arjuna had the right mentality to absorb those things. So we cannot be Krishnas. We cannot give the answer that Lord Krishna gave people. But we can know what Krishna answered, how he answered it. That to the extent that God wants us, we will understand those meanings. But what we can definitely learn from Arjuna is to ask the right questions. It's never too late to ask questions. So if you're facing dilemmas, it is okay to take a pause and ask for someone to solve these problems. And one has to patiently wait and not move away like the way Duryodhana did. He asks a question and it disappears. He never waits for that question. He never asks that question to Duryodhana, to Dronacharya again. He could have asked that question at the end of the day, first day's war. He said, I'm still feeling inadequate. Can you please help me with what this is? What do you feel? And how do you think we can fight this war? He never waits. So if we patiently, if we ask clear questions with all the openness, I'm sure God will help us to find an answer. Right? They say that with your lawyer and with your doctor, you're not supposed to hide anything. But imagine these questions which keep coming to us, we never stop to get the answer. There are always experts. There are always people who can guide us. So having a mentor in your career is very, very important. And ask and get the right answers. Bake those answers in your mind before one goes and actually um, fights the war. Then, and I will conclude today's session. We'll take a few questions also at the end. Okay, Sujit, if I'm right, that's what we would like to do. What we are looking at is a question again that Arjuna asked Krishna. There's a very profound lesson here. He says, look, I don't know what is good or bad for me. I have my own limitations in asking these questions. So you do something which is good for me. And that is what he uses the word Shreyas. Shreyas is long-term success. Prayas is short-term success. I think whenever we are planning anything in our career, it is important to have a medium to a long-term view as to what something is going to cause as an impact to your career, not just from a medium, not just from a short-term perspective, not what is going to happen to me in the next 1 month, 2 months. It is a career is like a marathon. It goes on for decades. So therefore, something may be right for now, but long term, it may not be the best thing to happen to you. So one should always make a very conscious choice to think long term. Now, why do I say conscious? Because short term behavior comes very naturally to us. It comes very quickly onto us. It can engulf us very easily. So unless one has a view about how one can look at it from a long-term perspective, we will have this situation, we will have this kind of a diffidence because we don't know. So one should develop a longer career plan. We cannot take everything that's going to happen tomorrow for granted. That look, I'm working for this company. Tomorrow the same thing will happen. Or a student who's saying, okay, I've been a good student, so probably a great high school student may not be a great college student. A great vice president may not be the best functional leader or a CEO. A great sales leader may not become a great CEO of the company, right? So there is a beautiful book. I think if you have not read it, you should definitely read it. It's written by a person by name Ram Charan. He's one of the noted, management gurus, and he says something very well. He has written a book called Leadership Pipeline, where he talks about how, and by the way, it's one of the most underrated books in the world of leadership in the world of management, because I don't know when that book came and went. Um, Most people do not seem to know about that book, but when people get to know and they eventually read it, it has got a fantastic recall. There is another book called What Got You Here Will Not Get You There, on HR systems and thinking. But I think Ramcharan's Leadership Pipeline is a very, very impactful book, because it says at each stage in your career, you will be, you can make, you have to make certain turns. It's like climbing a hill. So at each stage, you have to make the turn. Now, all of us know if we don't make the right turns when somebody is climbing a hill, then you know what's going to happen. That person is going to fall, right? So we have to make those turns and negotiate those curves to ensure that we go to the next level and climb uphill. So a person who is great at one particular level might not be great at another level. So therefore, it's important to have not, and we can, one can turn around, oh my God, there's so many changes. There's always chaotic. I don't know about what's going to happen next month. You're asking me to prepare my career for 25 years from now. But the thing is, yes, we may not have everything under our control, but a certain plan should be there in place. And of course, we will make changes to it as and when changes happen to us. But if we have that sense of purpose, we will be going towards that in a certain, in a certain manner. This is what, that's why Bhagavad Gita is called the spiritual GPS, right? For spiritual GPS, when one is using the GPS, what is the first thing we do? What's the first thing we do? We enter the destination we want to go to. You can't know, nobody can help you if you don't know where you're going, right? So if you imagine you sit in a taxi and just the driver keep looking at the driver will smile twice at you, not the third time, and then say, where the hell do you want to go? You're not telling me that, right? And the GPS does precisely that. The GPS, you cannot blame anything saying, okay, the GPS is not showing me. People will say, not showing you what? So no, that the way to reaching where is the next question. So it's important that we have a sense of where we are going and put it out in the form of a document, which is, popularly known as your career vision. So Arjuna, in this case, does not know his career vision, but he says, I want Shreyas. What is good for me? He is not saying, look, he's not saying I will not fight the war. He says, I want Shreyas. So tell me what is good for me. You tell me what is good for me, and I will do that. And of course, the whole Bhagavad Gita then follows. And finally, he says, Karishye Vachanam Tava. That means, yes, all my questions have been answered, all my dilemmas have gone away, and now I will fight the war. And he achieves what Krishna wanted him to do, which is, that's why this elaborate answers were given. That's why Krishna touches upon so many topics, because he wants Arjuna to fight the war as a prayer to him. if he understands the entirety, the enormity of that war, and not view this just like, okay, this is a small fight that I'm having with my cousins, and I have to, unfortunately kill some people whom I like. His whole thinking is limited to that. But then Krishna opens up really the world view, the panoramic view, the spiritual view, for him to see why this war has to be fought. So, if we can all understand why we have come here in the first place, why are we in this profession? I think it gives us an enormous sense of purpose, which is at the heart of all those 5 or 6 questions that Harvard Business Review and other publications have brought out as the main reason we are disengaged from work. If we get that, then our life will be beautiful.
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me check with Sundar. Sundar will be rejoining because he got disconnected.
My apologies. It just got disconnected for some reason. Can you hear me now? Okay. So that is what I think we have to learn, how we are able to get a slightly medium to long term view about our career. That is why Arjuna very consciously uses the word Shreyas. The only other place that you will see this word called Shreyas being used prominently is in the Katakopanishad, where Nachiketa is asking those 3 questions to Yama, and which I think itself is a brilliant topic to cover some other time. But I think if you just look at it, the whole aspect of looking at a long term view. So we had the opportunity today to cover about 5 lessons. And by the way, the Bhagavad Gita has not even started in that sense. Lord Krishna has not even spoken. And even before we touch that, we've got some very valuable lessons on our professional excellence. So I'd thank all of you for attending today's session. We'll pause now and take any questions that you have so far. Also, if you are interested in me addressing some other question that you have, I can do so tomorrow. There is no dearth of answers coming from Bhagavad Gita, as we have already seen that. So, thanks so much, and back to Sujit.
Thanks a lot, Sundar. What I'll do is I'll pause the recording and streaming. Then we can have a free session amongst ourselves. Give me a second here.